actually from Bangladesh. At least she was born in Bangladesh, but she moved from Bangladesh when she was very, very young at the outburst of the Independence War. And then Sanjeev Sahota, who comes from a Punjabi family. Then we'll give you a brief introduction to the two authors, and then I will examine the two works that they produced focus on migration and migrant lives, namely, respectively, In the Kitchen, written So Palestinian, now the issue of Palestine is every day on our televisions. Ukrainian, because of the war with Russia. Syrian, and Syrian families fleeing the horrors of war and the plight of migrant and asylum seekers who are drowning in the Mediterranean or lost at sea, as countries refuse to open ports and provide shelter, are broadcast almost daily in the media. Daily, as either Ukrainian or Palestine or both or Syria. These are issues that are affecting us globally. Yet, in the general turmoil of this global refugee crisis, individual stories are, with rare exceptions, rarely heard. They are concealed, sanitized, I would like to say, behind the accuracy of figures and statistics that reflect the exact numbers of casualties and survivors. Literature somehow contributed to fill in this major void. Christopher Schaberg has recently elucidated that, and I quote from him, literature is work. It takes work to create, disseminate, read, and preserve. And the last task is of crucial importance in locating firm footing in this wild rapids of time, in stating and sharing the unspoken, thus raising awareness of what lies beyond the shocking pictures published in the newspapers or the distressing footage on television news. We see that every day. In his 1985 essay on Günter Grass, Salman Rushdie had already identified the migrant as, quote, the central or defining figure of the 20th century, and I may add, even the 21st century. 30 years later, Monica Ali and Sanjeev Sahota, two writers whose families, I told you before, originally came from the Indian subcontinent, have devoted intense efforts to casting light on the personal ordeals of migrants, whose vicissitudes they have pieced together and reinvented by lending a compassionate ear to first-hand accounts and handed-down stories, while carefully reviewing the available sources of information, because before writing their text, they decided to document themselves on things that they did not really know in depth. In the two novels my talk intends to explore, they have focused their attention on a particular kind of migrants, illegal, non-documented migrants, and informal workers, whose uncertain and vulnerable existence has been finally exposed without oversimplifications, which are typical of the media, biases, and even distortions. And Judith Butler's notion of precarity and Guy Standing's idea of the precariat, which he calls in the subtitle of his 2011 treatise, the new dangerous class will provide the necessary theoretical framework to better understand and analyze the two novels and their characters. In their 2009 volume entitled Frames of War, Judith Butler explains the difference between the two intersecting concepts of precariousness and precarity. The former denotes a general ontological condition of fragility as an inherent trait of being human. We are all precarious because we are all doomed to die. The only thing that is certain in our life is the end of our life. As she observes, quote, "There is no thinking of life that is not precarious," end quote. But on the other hand, precarity indicates, and I quote, "that politically induced condition in which certain populations suffer from failing social and economic networks of support and become differentially exposed to injury, violence, and death," end quote. So precarity is therefore primarily experienced by the disenfranchised, the poor, the marginalized, even though, as Butler has recently pointed out, it has turned into a new form of regulation, or we may add a new hegemonic regime that distinguishes this historical time. In Isabel Laurie's words, nowadays precarization is not an exception. It is rather the rule. It has been normalized. It is normal that everything is precarious. In the post-Fordist era, characterized by the adoption of neoliberal models of development and marked by extreme flexibility and aggressive competition, high level of job insecurity aimed at maximizing profits regardless of social consequences, a new class has emerged, the so-called precariat, a term that merges precarity and proletariat, so precariat. According to Guy Standing, migrants, the light infantry of global capitalism, while forming a large share of the world's precariat, are actually in danger of becoming its primary victims, demonized and made scapegoat of problems not of their making. So even in Italy, for example, migrants are always cast the blame on anything that happens. It's always the migrants' fault. But in truth, the migrant are just the primary victim of this system that legitimizes, glamorizes even precarization. Illegal migrants are willing to accept significantly lower wages and poorer working conditions than other laborers. Moreover, they cannot claim any rights to health care. They're not entitled to occupational benefits, sick pay, maternity leave, severance pay, pensions. So they are convenient for employers. They're not even real citizens, but they are denizens, which is a word actually used in the Middle Ages to indicate permanent residents who did not have any political or socio-economical rights. Or even worse, they may be regarded as margisans, people without permanent residence status, underprivileged because they are also marginalized. They are at the margins of society. In Guy Standing's view, and I quote, "Too many interests benefit from an army of illegal migrants, and too many populists depict attempts at legalization as eroding the security of citizenry." So people are against the legalization of migrants because they benefit from their illegal work without benefits. The illegality of non-documented workers is widely exploited to the employer's advantage. They are cheap, unpretentious labor. They can be easily blackmailed if they are recalcitrant, and they're instantly replaceable if they don't perform, because, there is no protection to their work. Even though in Brick Lane, her 2003 debut novel, Monica Ali had already explored the green life of the British Bangladeshi community in Spitalfields, an area in the East End of London. It is in her third novel, In the Kitchen, that she delves into the issue of illegal immigration, human trafficking, which is the third largest organized crime on a global scale, and their dramatic impact on the labor market and society. I will tell you a little bit more about Monica Ali. She was born in Dhaka in 1967 on an Eastern Pakistani father and an English mother. And she moved to Manchester in 1971 when the war that would lead to the independence of modern-day Bangladesh broke out. Since her first publication, the Oxford-educated writer has been forced to bear the burden of representation, often placed on the shoulders of so-called minority artists who are not fully qualified, apparently, to cross the cultural boundaries of their own ethnic group, because their skin color operates as the dominant signifier of identity. Hence, Monica Ali is still been iconized as the trademark Brick Lane writer, despite both her later achievement and also the bitter controversy on the dubious authenticity of her Bangladeshi immigrant characters, given the fact that she has a mixed background and she never lived in Banglatown. She had a very privileged upbringing. She replied to that by stating in a 2003 article she gave to an interview to The Guardian that, quote, standing neither behind a closed door nor in the thick of things, but rather in the shadow of the doorway is a good place from which to observe. So she defends her position and the authenticity of her work. Shifting from the stifling environment of London's Banglatown, which is a monocultural cultural enclave, the writer's eye has actually embraced a much wider cultural horizon in the kitchen, which is a very strange text, suspenseful, which has variously been categorized as a Bildungsroman, as a thriller-oriented story, as a therapeutic narrative of transformation. She has drawn on many, many literary sources. So this is a characteristic of Monica Ali. She documents herself very much before writing a novel. So these novels are borderline between a sociological treatise and a fictional text. The plot of In the Kitchen is centered on the exploitation of illegal migrant workers and sex slaves, primarily coming from Eastern European countries. That became EU members in 2004 and 2007. So In the Kitchen reflects the most recent flow of migrants to the UK. The social function performed by the novel is all the more significant since the volume was composed at a time when victim-based legislations and measures had not been introduced yet in the UK, such as the UK Modern Slavery Act of 2015, demanding more transparency and from companies and their commitment to eradicating modern forms of slavery in their supply chains. The novel is set in contemporary London and chronicles the progress, and by progress I am using the word in the sense of John Bunyan, the Pilgrim's Progress. So the progress of a white executive chef in his early 40s, Gabe Lightfoot, who begins the story being completely indifferent to the trials and tribulations of the numerous migrants that toil under his orders in the kitchen of the Imperial Hotel. And the name of Imperial Hotel is also insightful. And he becomes increasingly aware of their vulnerability. And once he's confronted with the fragility of the precariat, who are actually stripped of dignity and human rights, essential human rights, Gabe abandons his idea of opening his own restaurant, not to feed the monsters of abuse and exploitations that are invariably connected with any business venture. This newly acquired sense of solidarity is what makes the previously overlooked ethical encounter, to quote Judith Butler, actually possible. So this series of reflections and changes in the chef's mind are initially triggered by a seemingly inconsequential episode, which marks the beginning of the novel, but actually a turning point in Gabe's life, the death of a Ukrainian porter, which accidentally, albeit mysteriously, occurs in the hotel basement where he secretly lives. So the story begins as if it was a crime novel, but is not. In the narrative, Manigal is at pains to depict the collective feelings of precariousness, insecurity, impermanence that characterizes modern life, not just the life of migrants, but everybody's life. So the long-established cotton mills in the north of England are closing down. They're transformed into shopping malls or tourist attractions. There is a widespread anxiety and fear of terrorist attacks. Everybody who's got dark skin is pointed at as a potential terrorist. And the very hotel where most of the story is set is the emblematic icon of present-day transient. After all, an hotel is a contradictory, ambiguous space where dwelling and traveling overlap, where there is no clear-cut distinction between the public and the domestic sphere. Beside alluding to the time when it was founded, the Victorian age, this extravagantly pretentious name Imperial Hotel is also indicative of the power relations that underlie its functioning, thus serving as a symbol of the imperialism of global economy. So the hotel kitchen is like a workhouse, a modern day workhouse where all the delicacies that are produced by underpaid and overworked labor for the greedy consumption of the upper class are just actually made, symbolically made, not just of the ingredients, but of the exploited lives of the employees. So Gabe's kitchen staff is presented as perfectly functioning, but we slowly understand that there is a lot behind their very effective way of working. And even the selection of personnel is interesting because it is as if in the kitchen, recipes for immorality were actually prepared. So, I mean, the staff is selected because they are intended, for example, women are intended to work as prostitutes, not just in the kitchen. So it is as if society were preying upon them, were cannibalizing them. So those who work in the kitchen are actually food for society, for this sick and morbid society. Even the sustainability of organic food production reveals its disquiet inside, because in the story, one realizes that in the effort to contain and cut costs without lowering the quality of products, only informal workers are hired in these organic food farms. So through the prejudiced comments of the elderly characters, such as Gabe's maternal grandmother and his father, Monica Ali describes and announces the typical scapegoating of the immigrants, who are always invariably called Pakis, regardless of their real origin. And they're held accountable for the growth of criminality, underemployment, because they steal the job of British citizens. And this is a widespread feeling across Europe. For example, in Italy, it is the same. There is this scapegoating of immigrant illegal workers who are actually doing the job that no Italian would ever do. They're being paid so low. So, and when they die, their death is inconsequential. They may be equated to what Giorgio Agamben defines as homo sacer. So basically, in the ancient Roman law, when a man had crossed certain lines, he was banned from the community and stripped of all rights. And consequently, his bare life, nuda vita, could be taken by anybody without legally committing murder, because they were no longer human beings. So immigrants who have crossed the borders of both geography and legality may be perceived as homines sacri. So they are exactly in this way. They can die, they can be replaced, they can be killed, and nobody knows. Nobody cares. And they actually inhabit this kind of moral twilight zone. They're like living zombies. Their existence is deemed less valuable, deficient, marred. And this is exactly what happens in Monica Ali's text. They are disposable people, in the words of Judith Butler, because their lives are not quite lives. They are destructible and ungrievable. So there are a lot of stories that are narrated in the text, and the fact of narrating their stories is what provides a counter narrative to the dominant narrative of irrelevance of these people. So we get to know, and the protagonist gets to know the story of the prostitute who had tried to flee from her pimp, only to be, repatriated by the British authorities. And immediately as she landed, she found the same pimp that she had abandoned, ready to catch her again and again and again. There is also the story of another person whose front teeth had been removed so that acting as a prostitute, she could perform better oral sex. So there are a lot of really, really disturbing stories, not just for the narrator, but also for the reader. But it's important that these stories are uncovered so that people realize what is behind what I said at the beginning, this sanitized facade, or this labeling of immigrant people as problems. So the main story of In the Kitchen is punctuated with all these digressions, and in the effort to emphasize the humanity, the dignity, and the worth of either invisible or demonized immigrants, especially if they are illegal, Monica Ali also has the intention to offer insights into the inner workings of neoliberal policies and practices. So the fact that people are without any form of scruples. I mean, they exploit, they throw, and even the idea of sustainability hides horrible things. And Gabe, the protagonist himself, experiences this and lives as if he were part of this precariat when he finds himself working in a food farm and together with the illegal immigrants, and he shared animal sheds for as a shelter, faces the same toil and hardship, and he realizes that his rights are trampled upon, and eventually the narrator, just like the reader, manages to form solid bonds of solidarity with his fellow creatures. That's why the novel is called a Bildungsroman, because the narrator passes from being completely indifferent to the plight of migrants to being one of them and therefore sympathetic. But now, let's move now to the other novel very quickly because time is running out. Sanjeev Sahota was brought up in a Punjabi family in Derbyshire. He had a degree in mathematics and worked for an insurance company, and he used to write at weekends. And he produced three novels actually, and The Year of the Runaways is his second novel, produced and released in 2015, and also received the Dylan Thomas, a nomination for the Dylan Thomas Prize. So Sanjeev Sahota wants to restore complexity to life. In a recent interview, he stated that the media and the government want a simple narrative that comes with easy hooks, easy catchwords and slogans, which make people think that the government is on top of the situation while the situation is completely different. So he wants readers to become responsible, because the ultimate responsibility is ours. He wants to tell the truth. And he wants literature to continue to hold a mirror up to society. So he says that finishing a book is like emerging from the bottom of a pool. You feel dizzy, dazzled, but finally capable of seeing the world with different eyes. The local and the global is fundamentally different from the way it was when you started reading the text. And The Year of the Runaway is set in Sheffield and in India around 2003, so more or less the same time as Monica Ali's in the Kitchen. It's got several protagonists. There is a person who is a chamar, a Dalit sub-community who arrives illegally in England after the slaughter of his family. There is Avtar, who immigrated with a student visa that he paid for to support his family with the proceeds of his work. And then there is Randeep, who is Avtar's friend, who enters into a scam marriage to be entitled to settle in the UK. So there are a lot of different possibilities. So the three boys end up living and working together on a building site, and their paths cross and diverge several times as the plot unravels. So what I would like to convey to you is the fact that in this text there is no idealization of India. Okay, India is not idealized as sometimes the mother country is idealized in immigrant novels. India is a difficult place, just like England. It's actually the mirror image of England, in the sense that there are social inequalities, there is a huge gap between the rich and the poor, there is urban degradation, social segregation, and all these issues are not confined to the global south, but they are also part of the landscape of the so-called global north. So these are global phenomena. There is no imaginary homeland, there is no romanticizing the land where they came from, but there is also no hope and no romanticizing of the new land of settlement. The world is just tough and it's just difficult everywhere. There is also hostility between the immigrants. The immigrants are not friends with one another, because if they were friends and supported one another, then they would not compete for the casual job like they do every day. There are also disturbing episodes in the text in which one immigrant plays tricks to another immigrant so that he can occupy his working position, because as I said at the beginning of my talk, workers are just replaceable. One or the other is the same for the workers. They are equated to production machines or beasts of burden. Their sense of time and space, that are supposedly fixed categories, are altered. Okay, so the title of the novel, The Year of the Runaway, suggests that time is different. It's articulated in a different way. The succession of the seasons passes almost unnoticed to the immigrants. And actually, the holidays that for us are the much longed for times of the year are the times of the year that they hate the most, because there is no job, there is no work, there is no possibility of getting an employment. The novel explores also the issue of spatial inequality, which has been investigated by political geographer Edward Soja. So the organization of space is such a critical aspect in human societies that justice and injustice are clearly detectable in it. Immigrants are separate and unequal. And undocumented migrants have restricted access to urban infrastructures such as healthcare, safe and hygienic working and living conditions, which are not evenly distributed across the city. So they are marginals, and therefore they have no rights to go to the hospital, for example, to cure serious diseases. They have to rely on underworld doctors who obviously demand to be paid. In the Year of the Runaway, even the map, which is invariably connected to the category of space, is a recurring image throughout the novel, signifying the immigrants' craving to take possession of a place in the world, as well as their loss of orientation in the novel environment. There are maps all over the place in the text. And possibly it is not by chance that the volume ends in Kanyakumari, which is the southernmost, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, the southernmost town of India that is mentioned several times in the narrative, while pointing at the map. So Kanyakumari is depicted as a symbolic end of the subcontinent, as an emblematic open space where, in theory, inequalities and precarity that bind the global north and the global south together may ultimately cease to be. So Kanyakumari becomes symbolic. It's open. It's the end of the world that we know. And this is how the novel ends. Somehow fostering a better future where all these issues that have been excavated, that have been exposed by Sanjeev Sahota may be addressed not just by the governments, but by single individuals who should become more responsible for their fellow human beings. To conclude, as one of the characters in the kitchen explains, there is more truth in fiction than in fact. This is a sentence that is uttered by one of the characters. And I would like to conclude my talk by going back to where I started from. So actually, the work of literature and its relevance, its pivotal importance today, its responsibility today. And I continue to underline the word responsibility. So in an age of populisms, of post-truth, of alternative facts, books such as Monica Alice and Sanjeev Sahota's are entrusted with a tremendous responsibility. They succeed in restoring a clear and powerful voice to those who are normally silenced, while treating what is still the most vicious, because it's still untreated. There is no cure for that, and it's so widespread as a disease, and this disease is indifference. So thank you so much for the attention. I can't hear you.
Sure. You are focused on the nature of migration in the world, and to me, entire world, particularly it may be the Europe, it may be America or India. No one is free from this problem, and this area is becoming more interesting to the political scientists, economists, and sociologists for their research. Now, some new ideas I have received from you, like precariat, which is a social class of people who experience job insecurity and lack stable income and living condition. If we are not able to establish equality in different parts of the world, this problem will remain. We can remember Ayala Kurdi. Entire world was sickened to see the dead body of that young child, and it is happening everywhere and every day. It's the most tragic part of our history. So thank you, Madam, for your lecture. Now I am requesting Professor Jitendra Sahu of Goldman University to say something and convey a message on behalf of our association. Professor Sahu.
Thank you, ma'am, for your excellent presentation. Really, we are grateful to you for listening for such an eloquent and beautiful lecture from this morning. And we hope we will again meet you in your future. And if you will permit us, and we have some kind of interactions, those who are present here, they may have some kind of ways to know to listen a few additions to your you can say address. If you will permit us, then we can go ahead. Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. The
Thank
house
you.
yes, the house is now open, and if the fellow participants of the presentation, if some kind of observations uh, among you, please.
for this such an eloquent presentation. I was listening very depthly to your presentation, and there you had made a very interesting distinction, drawing on Judith Butler, that the precarity and precariousness. Yeah, and I was wondering if you just bring in the particular, methodology nowadays we are using, that is the positionality theory. That positionality theory often, helps one navigate the multiple vulnerability that women have been through in different societies. Since you are actually comparing the two books from the same subcontinent but from two different countries. So I want to know your take on this, ma'am.
It was not perfectly audible. Okay, so I try to. I hope I understood correctly. Okay, so these terms, precarity and precariousness, have no distinction in the world, in the sense that we are all precarious, in the sense that we are all doomed to die and our life can end any second. But the terms precarity, the term precarity is interesting because it refers to people who are more exposed because government create the conditions for them to be exposed. They don't provide protection, they don't provide social security, they don't provide infrastructures. Why? Because they don't exist legally. I use the term margisans because they are left at the margins of society. And incidentally, in Italy, I run a research center which is entitled Marginality, which aims at bringing the margins to the center and settling these clear-cut divisions between margin and center. Okay, so I think it is very interesting that literature that up until, I don't know, the 19th century was mostly considered as something that was, the privilege of the upper classes, because the working class could not have leisure time to read, is now addressing social, political, and cultural issues, compensating what the governments don't do. So when I speak about the work of literature, I speak exactly of this, of the responsibility of literature to creating a better society. So whereas neoliberal politics just tend to exploit, literature and literary people are entrusted with a very important mission, the mission of making us human. We are losing our humanity. We are considering, we ourselves are considering ourselves machines of production. Even in the academia, we have to produce, publish. But, and in Italy, for example, we are obsessed about the venue where we publish because they have to be Class A journals. And I think that in India is exactly the same. But what do we write? We often not wonder the impact of what we write. We should go against this mechanism we are all part of. The fact that we have to produce Class A articles for Class A journals and instead focus on the contents and the impact of what we say, what we write, for the benefit of society. Because after all, we are the humanities. This is what we should be doing. We are adopting ourselves in our own field, these neoliberal politics that are, like octopus. They are invading every realm, and we should rebel against it. And literature has always been rebellious, and we should be taking part in this revolution that is making an impactful research on society. So making what we write relevant, not just for our little careers, but for society in general. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, another addition, just we heard from you that you are really running another kind of research institutions with regard to this margins and marginalized people. We are really grateful again to you. And if any kind of finally, we are now on the stage to conclude this session actually. Again, thankful to you for your excellent delivery in this morning. And we hope that we will get a kind of paper from this lecture. You will definitely send us a kind of paper and which will be published in the next issue of our journal. This West Bengal Political Science Association having its own journal, and it has its online publication mode also. And we are really requesting you on behalf of our assistant, and we will be grateful to you if you can send us a kind of paper, this lecture. And this we are actually expecting from you. And thank you. Thank you for giving us the time. And thanks again. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, ma'am. This session has already been concluded. Yes. Please left, man. You can left.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye.
Thank you.
আচ্ছা, আমাদের প্রথম যে সেশনটা ছিল